maybe it's not genuine fun, maybe it's ironic fun, but there's like a playfulness to it. There's a like, wow, politics doesn't suck today, right?
This week, is Kamala Brat? Marc Andreessen thinks that AI can save comedy. And an influencer is suing another influencer for stealing her aesthetic. And our main topic, I talked to The Atlantic's Charlie Warzel about Twitter under Elon, Kamala's meme potential, and more. This week was a really big week in politics and social media. You had Biden drop out, Kamala stepped in, and immediately the internet was completely overrun with coconut memes, Brat remixes.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Charlie Warzel is here to break it all down with me. He's a staff writer at The Atlantic covering tech and online culture. Hi, Charlie. Welcome to Power User.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So this week, Biden announced that he was resigning from the presidential race. He didn't do this on any sort of video platform or TV. He really did it on social media. I think most people saw this announcement on X or saw the X post cross-posted to other platforms. It seems like despite what a lot of people have reported and maybe wished, Twitter still remains the place for breaking news. You said that it has the juice. Can you talk a little bit about what you meant and why is Twitter so relevant right now?
Yeah, I regret to inform you, Twitter has the juice situation. What I meant by it was essentially that Twitter feels very vibrant in recent weeks and sort of essential to this conversation that helps shift the narratives in how we're understanding this political moment. And that it feels more like there's been a long period of time where Twitter has kind of languished under Elon Musk's tenure, or people, left it in droves. And so what I was really trying to communicate is that Twitter is sort of like this cockroach that is kind of ugly and unappealing, and a lot of people, don't want it in their household or whatever, but it won't die. And that is really this feeling of observing the past 6 months. All of a sudden, Twitter is kind of back.
Why do you think that these more progressive or liberal political candidates, commentators, et cetera, are still using this platform that I feel like we all sort of acknowledged was a very right-leaning platform under Elon?
I think it's super awkward, right? I feel it as a journalist myself, like someone who has, been on the other side of Elon Musk's, attacks or whatnot, or attacks on the industry that I work in. I think it speaks to the centrality of the platform in order to attract attention, right? Like in order to shift and change these narratives. It's the quickest way into the bloodstream, right? Of the political, elite. It's the quickest way to get those things happening. Journalists, influencers, politicians, like everyone wants a little bit of that attention, right? Because it's their jobs to attract it and do something positive with it or inform people. And Twitter is just still this space because I think there's like this lock-in, right? People have these huge audiences that they've built up over this period of time. And then there's just like the instinct, right? Twitter is this like gamified amusement park style of like experiencing the news. And I think for better or worse, and probably for worse, a lot of people who have power are addicted to that feeling. So that's where they go.
Yeah, you also wrote about sort of how Twitter's growing relevance is affecting Elon Musk's political power and power in Silicon Valley. I think when Elon took it over and everyone thought, okay, he's going to run this thing into the ground, it's going to be dead on arrival. People didn't have a lot of high hopes. As you mentioned, it still really remained politically relevant. Has that given Elon Musk more sway in more political spaces?
I don't know if it's given him, it may with people like Trump. Like I know he's closer to Trump now reportedly. I'm not sure about that, specifically if Twitter is the reason, but I do think the influence that he's had over the platform has kind of shifted the Overton window a little bit among some of these people who for a very long time have been flirting with, like edgelord type stuff or like right-wing shit posting or whatever it is, right? And the great example of that is the Silicon Valley venture capitalists, the Marc Andreessens of the world, David Sachs, the guys from the All In podcast. I think what Musk has done, being so, trolly and being so openly supportive of right-wing candidates, helping DeSantis launch his campaign for president on using, his platform and Twitter as the place to do that. I think it's given a lot of these people in Silicon Valley this feeling that like he's no longer if you express support for like MAGA policies or Trump himself, you're no longer, going to be a pariah, right? Like
Not even close. I mean, we've got J.D. Vance as his running mate now, Trump's running mate, right?
Right. And so when Marc Andreessen and Ben Horowitz last week announced their support for Trump, that they were going to be backing him financially. And
these are two of the biggest VCs in Silicon Valley, for people that don't know.
Yes. And Ben Horowitz said something about like, okay, like we have to do this for America, blah, blah, blah. And then said like, sorry, Mom.
We think Donald Trump is actually the right choice. And sorry, Mom, I know you're going to be mad at me for this, but like we had to do it.
And it was like, I thought that it was just such an indicative statement, because it's like, oh, it's transgressive enough to seem like it's cool or whatever, but it's like, it's not transgressive enough to actually like get him canceled, right? Or get him disinvited. I
don't think it'll even remotely get him canceled, or that it's like cool. I feel like it's become the norm in Silicon Valley.
Well, it's funny because I've been talking to people, like the people who are making a lot of these tech products, right? And
yes.
What they're telling me is like,
right.
No, it's not the case. It's like the financiers.
Of course, not among
the
workers. Yeah, not among the workers, but among the the elite sort of like VC money men, right?
I think they see it truly as like they're very risk brained, Mm-hmm. They have this thing of like, oh, what is the contrarian take that I can, like, where can I get in on the ground floor on this thing and look like a genius later? It's like, oh yes, I defied the mainstream media, I defied all this. It's a really contrarian philosophy, and I feel like it is a risk. It could backfire.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, Elon Musk seems like the ringleader of this new rightward ideology in Silicon Valley. Of course, Marc Andreessen and Ben Horowitz have been leaning that way for a while. They were pretty outwardly right-leaning even back in 2020, although they didn't endorse Trump back then. But I wonder how long this can last. If Kamala does succeed in beating Trump this November and the political landscape changes, will these people flip? Because Kamala is also a product of, the Bay Area and has a relationship in the tech world. And I'm kind of wondering what you think the effects would be of that type of administration on this. I mean, could that sort of nip all of this in the bud? And do you think that they will start, cozying up to the current administration?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I want to be clear with is I'm not sure whether or not he has power, right? He has influence in the platform. And I think that there's a lot of, among people who want to see the Trump campaign fail, there's a little bit of anxiety of like, is this network going to be, used to Trump's advantage in some way, right? Yeah. Is he going to lean on the scales a little and change something? But to the point of what would happen, in a Harris administration, I think regardless, we're going to see this social media temperature and, velocity probably drop a little, right? Obviously it'll continue to stay, but there's something very X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it specific about political elections and election seasons, and especially as they like ramp up into that last 3, 4, 5 months where it's just like the news moves on, the temperature gets going, the anxiety builds up, people need to check in. It's like, I think I wrote in the piece, like Twitter or X is in the doom scrolling business, and business is booming at the end of these, campaign cycles.
Yeah. What do you think Kamala's digital strategy looks like going into this election?
It's really interesting because when, you were actually like one of the first people to write about this in for a national publication, the sort of the Kamala, the coconut pilling of America among the extremely online.
Coconut pilled, of course, is a reference to this speech that she gave a while ago where she made this funny reference.
My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
When I was writing about it yesterday, I was like, here's this great opportunity, right? Like, they can find this way to attract this attention. And then, I was like watching them rebrand with like the Brat font, right? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this could get really corny very quickly. Like, it's not yet, right? But it could, right? If they lean in the wrong way. And so I think it's like a fine line to walk. Like, while there's a lot of enthusiasm, I think it, like there's a lot of opportunity. But what I would say is like the biggest asset that she brings for, like a digital strategy, it's that I think there's this opportunity to just attract like a massive amount of attention, right? Because this campaign is playing out so like differently than it normally does, right? This sort of a president stepping down, like it's a historic situation, so there's tons of attention there. And I think just like the best thing that they could do is just try to like blot out the sun, right?
Yeah.
Like Donald Trump just spent the last couple weeks monopolizing the airwaves with like these iconic images and getting shot in the convention, and Hulk Hogan's at the RNC ripping his shirt off and all this stuff. It's this attentional blackout. And now he's like totally on the opposite. And I think when he has shown, when he is not in the spotlight and is trying to be, he becomes more erratic, more angry, like the less enjoyable version of himself. And I think that there's a real opportunity for the Harris campaign to just use this moment on all platforms, just like a full attentional blitz, and just that's the biggest thing they can do. It's less like what it is, it's more just like that it's blotting out the sun.
I will say I talked to a bunch of people involved with digital strategy for PACs over the past 24 hours that have been trying so hard to do influencer efforts for Biden and get content creators, people with big followings to post for Biden. Nobody's wanted to do it. I wrote about, especially Gen Z creators have just been absolutely hands off. But there's been so much excitement around Harris. And a bunch of people have said that already they're seeing people reaching back out saying, hey, what about that campaign you mentioned? Can we pick that up? I'd love to do something together. Can we collab with Kamala? So I do think it'll be interesting to see if they can seize on that. You wrote about this idea of the Hot Ones test for political fitness and how Kamala has this ability to connect with audiences online that Biden really couldn't reach. Can you talk a little bit about what you meant? What is the Hot Ones test?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Hot Ones is a YouTube interview show where celebrities go on and eat a series of increasingly spicier chicken wings and answer questions. Very popular, beloved. So many people, watch it on YouTube. It's become its own memeable thing. And there was this joke that myself and other people were having online about Joe Biden, your campaign's in trouble, go on Hot Ones, right? And it was originally a joke, and then it became this, in my mind, this sort of test, right? Like if the Biden campaign felt he couldn't reliably do that without either, embarrassing himself, or that he just wasn't even able to do it, or that people wouldn't, want him on or whatever, it shows this liability as a campaigner if you can't meet people in some of the most like popular venues. And so that became like my theory of attention for him. And Kamala Harris is someone who, I think could fit very easily in that. I think I've heard now that like Hot Ones is like an apolitical show that doesn't want to have political candidates on. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that aside, I think what it speaks to is exactly what you were saying, right? Like Kamala Harris has long been not herself an online figure, but has had a digital fandom that's been around it for a long time.
I'm so sick of hearing, let's talk about Kamala memes. She's totally owning the internet. Like Gen Z stands her. It's like, I think a lot of young progressive online users, and especially when we did our Washington Post analysis of kind of who was the most heavily boosting of this like coconut pilled, content, it's young progressive Twitter and Instagram users that are they don't agree with anything to do with her ideology. It's sheer practicality of like, let's just get Biden out so that we don't have Trump. And it's sort of this compromise. And I really like this tweet from this girl, Claire Schaffer, who said, I could be totally wrong, but all I see in Kamala memes is Gen Z nihilism over a lack of choice in the political system. It's not really a sincere standing of a politician. The former is also worthy of critique, but let's not conflate that with the latter. And I kind of agree. Like, I think it's fun and ironic, and people can stand her now because everybody just wants Trump gone if you're young and progressive. But I don't know that once people get to know her policies, that she will be able to have this same level of popularity. Like, there's a reason that these groups didn't coalesce around her in 2020.
I think that's totally right. And, I think back in like February, when New York Times columnist Ezra Klein wrote this piece and did this about, we need Biden to step down, right? We need to have this open primary thing. A lot of the pushback was the same pushback that we saw. But people that were in support of this idea of Biden stepping down, well before it became an actual reality, were focused around this idea of there needs to be some enthusiasm. A campaign that is just run out of like suck it up and we will march, towards democracy for this reason. Like, that's not an invalid thing, but I think there's this feeling, especially among younger people, of that's not a reason to get me out to vote, right? Just simply saying you have to do this, or it's, an apocalyptic scenario, is not necessarily positively motivating. It is negatively motivating. And so I think that there's a ton of frustration there. And I think that what you're seeing is all of this excitement just in the sense that the political system has changed to some degree, right?
Yeah.
It's just that I think, you wrote in your piece about all this a couple weeks ago, the idea of comparing it to a meme stock, right? And the thing with a meme stock is this idea that a small group of people who don't think that they would be able to affect change can band together and do something potentially ridiculous, but it doesn't really matter almost what it is. It's that change happened in some way.
Yeah.
So I think that's what people are excited about.
I totally agree. I think it's this idea of change happening through an online collective. I think Kamala is kind of the ultimate meme stock candidacy in that way. I also spoke to the 20-year-old comms director of Voters of Tomorrow, which is a Gen Z group of content creators and other people that are sort of activists in terms of getting out the vote. And one thing that she told me is that young people just want to feel excited. They have never had that Barack Obama moment where they felt excited to vote in an election. Young progressive people were not enthusiastic about Hillary in 2016. They were certainly not enthusiastic about Biden in 2020, but they sort of did suck it up and get on board. And I think this is the first election in a lot of their lifetimes that they kind of feel an excitement, like they feel part of the political system, or they feel like their voice was even remotely heard by a political party that I would say for the past 8 years has had this suck it up mentality. It's vote for us or else, instead of vote for us because XYZ.
Right. And to speak to that, there was this moment on Thursday night at the RNC where Hulk Hogan came out and he was doing this thing and people were like, oh my God, this isn't politics. And it just triggered in me. I was like, but it is, because politics is a big, dumb spectacle. It's about all these incredibly important things, and yet it's also a big, dumb, televised media spectacle. And people having fun isn't something that should be sneered at. What you're seeing online with these people is maybe it's not genuine fun, maybe it's ironic fun, but there's a playfulness to it. There's a wow, politics doesn't suck today.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you got to capture in a bottle and store in the reserves and figure out how to harness towards something. Kamala Harris might not be the exact vessel for it, but there needs to be more of this coming from the Democratic Party, because as toxic as the MAGA, online politics situation is, those people are having fun for them, right? There is a sense
They're having a great time,
yeah,
trolling, shitposting. And I feel like there's an excitement around, I was just talking to a bunch of right-wing content creators that were at the RNC, and just the fun that they were having and the kind of creativity and the nonsense of it all. And I think that's why the Dark Brandon meme never hit. When you look at the sort of coconut-pilled, funny, drunk wine aunt memes about Kamala versus this Dark Brandon meme, it seemed like the Biden campaign never actually understood what the Dark Brandon meme even was, which is essentially progressive users co-opting this kind of idea of a Dark Brandon who kind of is secretly based by backing very progressive policies. And it was wait a minute, is Biden secretly based and cool? And then they very quickly co-opted it. They couldn't understand the irony behind it almost. And his participation in it never really, it felt like this kind of weird negative meme. Whereas the coconut stuff feels very fun, as you're saying, and participatory.
And what's interesting about it too is that those clips, those Harris clips that became part of the meme, they were clipped out by an RNC
Yes.
research account, right? So there is this thing to it of oh, we're gonna you think that's owning us, right? You think that's a negative, we're gonna spin this around into a positive, right? And that's a little bit of maybe even the genesis of the Dark Brandon thing. But there was something just really inauthentic about all of it because of the fact that you had somebody who it was not believable that they were in these spaces doing this, right? Kamala Harris projects someone who if you showed them some weird tweets or whatever about them that she would think it's funny, right? Can you imagine trying to like explain like a supercut Brat remix of some weird stuff that happened with Joe Biden, like to him? It would be this like really like, hey, can we sit you down? Let's walk you through the history of this whole thing. And there's this, and yes, there's this pop artist, and like it would take 45 minutes. And so that kernel of like inauthenticity, it's not only, hard to like parse, but I think it pisses people off. Like these same people who are just like, what are we doing here? Like, this is how you're trying to attract my vote, like with this totally contrived situation. So yeah, I think that the liability of that is now gone.
Yeah, well, it just goes back to what you were saying about the hot ones test of like just not being able, like, can you seem organic and authentic in these online spaces? No one was buying that Biden was secretly this like based edgelord, like who would do anything possible. Like he couldn't, I think he could barely get a sentence out of the debate. And so it sort of just read very inauthentic, as you said.
What's interesting is that he actually was, if you go back to the Biden administration, like Onion Joe or whatever it was, right? Like the ice cream cone and the Corvette and all that stuff. Like there was an authenticity around that, right? Which was that he was kind of like at his peak in the 70s, rad dad, at the like flipping burgers on the barbecue and kind of like, or like weird uncle, right? Like unpredictable Uncle Joe, that kind of thing. And so there was an authenticity there. And then, I mean, you can like age out of that. Like that's sort of what I was trying to get at with this idea of like an intentional, like Biden was an intentional liability, which was that anytime he made a public appearance at this point, he was basically creating an attack ad against himself. And that's just like a bad place to be.
Yeah, not what you want as a leading presidential political candidate. All right, Charlie. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, I'm here with my showrunner, Zach Mack. We're going to talk about some of the big stories this week. Hey, Zach.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Okay, so I'm obsessed with this influencer lawsuit. These two Texas-based content creators, Sydney Nicole Gifford and Alyssa Scheel, I hope I'm saying that right, they're both in the fashion niche. So they met up to talk about a potential collaboration. Right after the meeting, Alyssa blocks Sydney and then suddenly starts posting a lot like Sydney, like basically posting kind of almost identical content to Sydney's. So Sydney is now suing Alyssa, saying that she has violated the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is designed to protect copyright holders from online theft. Sydney alleges in this lawsuit that Alyssa used really similar beige and gray neutral color schemes, fonts, camera angles, basically mimicking Sydney's whole vibe. And she says that she even recommended products from Sydney's Amazon storefront. Sydney's asking from between $30,000 to $150,000 in damages for mental anguish and copyright infringement, basically arguing that this caused her a loss of income. I think this is really interesting because it's kind of like, can you steal someone's whole vibe? Like, I know you can steal copyrighted content, but in this case, it doesn't sound like she lifted her exact content. She just kind of took her aesthetic.
Yeah, just borrowed her aesthetic. Insert Soldier Boy meme. He copied my whole flow, bar for bar.
He copied my whole fucking flow. Word for word, bar for bar.
Listen, I don't know a lot about copyright law, but this seems loose, right? Like, it's just like aesthetic is so vague and ephemeral, and it just feels like so many people are doing that constantly. I was watching a movie the other night, and it was like, it so clearly wanted to be Fight Club, and I looked, and it came out like the year after Fight Club, and I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Like, it's just like this happens constantly in culture, constantly. I just don't know that she has a case.
It reminds me of Emma Chamberlain. When Emma Chamberlain blew up in 2018, you had this entire class of content creators that blew up really by mimicking her style on YouTube.
Right.
Not to say that they weren't original, like people like Summer McKeon and stuff. Like they're definitely their own personality, but they were in that sort of like Emma genre. What's interesting to me is that neither one of these people are household names. I mean, if this girl is getting copied a lot, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be someone like Julia Fox, or like one of these real trendsetters that gets just ripped off left and right. But I do think that it'll be an interesting case to litigate. And especially when it comes to like copying exact products or camera angles or aesthetics, it's like, how much do you own? How much of your digital vibe and identity do you actually own?
Right.
I would probably argue almost none.
And I get the sense that the smaller you are, the more you want to hold on to protecting your own aesthetic, right? Obviously, Julia Fox, people know who she is, so they can attribute her aesthetic to her. And if they see someone kind of encroaching on that, it's easy to call that out. And also, even if someone now takes Julia Fox's aesthetic, she's household name enough to be fine on her own. This is probably all they have. They really have to guard it.
She only has about 250,000 followers on Instagram.
But it's tough. I don't know that you can. I don't know that there is a good case. And I just think this happens all the time, especially within fashion. There's just so much mimicry. There's that famous Pablo Picasso quote, good artists copy, great artists steal,
Yeah. I don't know if this stealing influencer is a great artist, but I do think that they had a similar vibe anyway. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of precedent this case sets for more of these disputes, because I think more of these disputes will come up. I mean, we all copy each other, right? That's kind of, like you said, it's the nature of fashion and creativity and art. I think it's just a matter of like, how much are you lifting? And the fact that she was supposed to collab with this girl and then the girl blocked her, to me, that shows like some level of intent.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
Catch me just jacking your style next week. Another stat that came out this week was this survey that Passion Fruit wrote up saying that over half of US adults would be a full-time content creator if they could. This was a survey conducted by this influencer marketing platform, so they definitely have an interest here. But They surveyed thousands of people and found that the majority of people between the ages of 18 and 60 said that if they could make a living as a full-time influencer, they would do it. I think this just speaks to like that most people still think that this is an aspirational career, which it's kind of not.
I also think most people just think being an influencer is super easy and all you get to do is like have fun and occasionally talk to the camera and try on cute outfits and go to fun events. And they think that's sort of all it is. I genuinely think they think that being an influencer is incredibly fun and easy. And who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want a fun and easy job that you just get paid for showing up?
Yeah, I want a fun and easy job.
Exactly. And that's not me saying that this job is easy. I just think that is people's impression of it.
I agree. I think it's actually grueling and miserable and hard, and it's really hard to make a living online, but I do think it's still aspirational. I guess what stood out to me, and again, this is like a survey conducted by an influencer marketing company, but just there's been so much correction in the past few years. This industry is hard. It's essentially like a gig work industry, but for social platforms almost. And I feel like the bubble would have burst by now, but you still see people aspiring to this career. So.
Totally. I mean, you had Lily on the other week, who's sort of a big time influencer, and she's just straight up said, "I make $200,000 a year. $200,000 a year is a great salary, but it's not. You're not rich if you're living in LA or New York. You are not a rich person in those cities. And rent, groceries, those things will still matter if you're making $200K.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to raise your family on that.
Right.
For sure. I would take it though.
Same.
Anyway. So Chris Best, the co-founder of Substack, interviewed venture capitalist Marc Andreessen for his newsletter. And they had this long kind of meandering conversation about AI and content, et cetera.
By the way, comedy needs a renaissance, like very badly. Like it's basically died. And so it could be the way the story gets told is like AI saves comedy.
But the funniest moment to me, which Business Insider pulled out, is this moment when Marc Andreessen says that he basically thinks that AI can save comedy. He thinks that comedy is kind of on the decline right now, and AI, basically people being able to generate endless content, could maybe bring it back. I just thought that this portion of the interview was kind of hilarious and out of touch. I generally disagree with Marc Andreessen on everything like he says politically, but I do agree that generative AI is going to allow us to create a lot of our own custom content. I just don't think that we're experiencing any sort of like decline in comedy right now.
No, I don't think we're having a lull in comedy at all. I listened to some of this interview and it sounded like one of the points he was making was specifically around like comedic animation and how you won't need an entire animation studio. You can just animate your own like version of South Park or something like that very cheaply. And for that, great. I love TV, comedy animation, and I do see AI's potential for that. But I don't think comedy is like fundamentally broken or just generally in need of saving.
100%. Also, what drives me crazy about these conversations, and I wanted to just like reach through the screen and like shake someone, is who is paying for it? Like every time they talk about like, it's going to lower the bar to create for creativity. It's like, okay, great. So now all those amazing animators are amazing creative people that were getting salaried jobs doing this stuff are just producing endless content for free. Like, who is going to support an industry? Like, are all of the creative industries just going to be people, one-man bands basically making content for free, hoping that it'll go viral so that it can like get them some sort of career or fame? It just seems like a very broken system. And there's a lot of economic questions that I feel like weren't addressed in that conversation. It was very like, we welcome, you know, AI innovation. And especially as a creative person myself, like I love that the bar for creation has been lowered. Like I love that I can use these Adobe tools to produce better photos and videos and things like really easily in a way that I probably would have had to hire someone for a couple years ago. But people need to make a living and creative people need to make a living.
This sort of reminds me of Jimmy Kimmel a long time ago talking about kind of like the death of the late night show and him just saying, you know, I'm one of many late night shows now. And eventually everyone is going to have their own late night show on YouTube, like with just a micro audience, you know, like anyone can be a late night host now that YouTube exists. But the more you have that, the smaller the audiences get and the less, you know, the less money it generates.
The harder and harder it is to monetize. Yeah.
Totally.
It's just impossible to monetize. So I don't know about AI and comedy. I also wonder what Marc Andreessen considers comedy. I mean, this is a man that just came out in support of Trump and is fully red-pilled and cannot seem to... I'm very interested to know, you know, what his comedic sense is. He like laughs at Elon tweets, you know, and
he said comedy is dead in this interview. And I'm like, for who? How?
Someone should tell him that Elon said comedy is legal.
Yes.
Now on X. One of the most terrifying developments in the robot world this week is the Department of Homeland Security bought these dog-like robots. They look like the dogs from Black Mirror. You've probably seen them. Like they're these little robot dogs on 4 legs that can run around and go into dangerous environments, whatever. But they equipped these dogs with these antennas that can essentially shut down smart home devices in a home. So a lot more homes have these smart home enabled things that can apparently be used for booby trapping. So the idea is to have these dogs that you can kind of send into dangerous situations that will shut down the technology at you know, in a smart home and essentially render it into a dumb home so that these tech-enabled booby traps won't get the police officers, I guess, that are trying to come into the home. The dog can also, I guess, provide video and audio feedback to officers before entry. And it carries this onboard computer that can do a DDoS attack against any internet-enabled device in a home.
I mean, the future is here, right? This is like a scene straight out of Minority Report. And it's weird. I don't know what to say other than it feels very weird and futuristic.
I can't wait for the next time I get swatted or one of my family members gets swatted for like this robot dog to come through the door instead. Like, I feel like it seems like a disastrous idea. But at the same time, police are so volatile. I mean, they literally just shot a woman for holding a steaming pot of water in her hand recently. So I don't know. I don't know that these dogs would be that much better. It seems like the dogs at least don't have guns. So, you know, but also like, what if it comes into your house and disables something that you really need?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would rather a robot dog coming through the door than several armed policemen, you know, if I had to choose. But
I just think it's only a matter of time too, that before these dogs get armed. I'm pretty sure they are 100%. Armed in other parts of the world. And also, I think it's really scary the way that a lot of these Department of Homeland Security and police forces are embracing technology. It reads very Terminator-esque to me. And I feel like we're closer and closer to Black Mirror every day. Police state vibes.
I mean, this is RoboCop.
Please put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply.
I think you'd better do what he says, Mr. Kenny.
You now have 15 seconds to comply.
This is actually RoboCop, where the police are corporatized and they infuse new cutting edge, dangerous technology into their police force, and it wreaks havoc. This is literally the plot of RoboCop.
Yeah, well, RoboCop's, I guess, long been reality here. But yeah, it's kind of weird. I'm like, how many people are booby trapping? When I think of booby traps, I think of Home Alone. You know, it's like, what? How are you booby trapping using? I'm sure there are ways, but I don't know if it's like.
You just think of like a paint can, like swinging in and knocking this robot over.
Yeah. I'd like to see the police fight that.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and I know that Charlie and I got into some of this before, is just this crazy media frenzy around Kamala and Brat. There was this CNN segment this week that was truly one for the ages. You had Jake Tapper, Caitlin Collins, who, by the way, is a millennial, and another woman whose name I cannot remember, but she looked to be a woman that's not Gen Z. And they're all sitting around this table trying to explain Brat and Kamala to their audience.
The singer Charlie XCX tweeted last night, "Kamala is Brat." Kamala has branded her Kamala HQ Twitter page with the same aesthetic of the album. That's another Gen Z word, aesthetic.
It has a color. Chartreuse is the color.
So is the idea that we're all kind of Brat and Vice President Harris is Brat?
This segment just read as parody to me. It reminded me of when I went on Morning Joe 5 years ago, actually, to explain what meme accounts were. And I just wonder when people in cable news are going to learn about the internet. Like, when is it going to happen? They have young people on staff.
I think the cords will be fully cut before that happens. There's also a moment in this clip where they refer to aesthetic as a Gen Z word. And I'm just like, aesthetic is not a Gen Z word. It's just a word used by anyone with like taste, I guess.
Yeah. It's weird too, because Jake Tapper himself is pretty online. Like, I'm like, you guys know better than this. You guys are on there. I see you on there every day posting. Like, there's no way you don't know what Brat means.
At least the phrases that they're trying to learn through Kamala are forward focused, right? They're like phrases that are coming out now. Whereas like with Biden, we had to like kind of remember like, oh, what does alley cat mean again? You know, like we had to sort of like,
he was saying
back.
stuff from like the 40s. Yeah. Like I didn't know what he was talking about ever. Also, I mean, just, yeah, it's really crazy. I do think that they're, you know, the Kamala campaign is on this like razor edge, like this like knife's edge of like, will they go too far? Will they jump the shark? Katie Natopoulos had a good piece this week, basically saying like, don't acknowledge it too much because then it becomes cringe. Right. So we'll see how it goes forward. I feel like this frenzy is just, once something's reached cable news, you know that it's not culturally relevant anymore. So I feel like this meme might be on the way out at this point.
Yeah.
I feel like CNN and all of these cable news companies just need to listen to the like Gen Z producers and production assistants.
They're probably running the show's TikTok account and not actually producing the show.
Yeah. Potentially. All right. Well, thanks so much, Zach. That is a wrap for this week. All right. That's the show. You can watch full episodes of Power User every week on my YouTube channel at Taylor Lorenz. Our show is produced by Travis Larchuk and Jelani Carter. Nishat Kurwa and Zach Mack are our executive producers. Our video editor is Brandon Kiefer. Power User is part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. If you like the show, give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We'll be back next week with another episode of Power User. See you then.